When people talk about family businesses, they usually picture something wholesome. Parents teaching their kids the ropes, working side by side, building something that can be passed down for generations. That's what I thought my life was going to be. My parents owned a mid-sized company that, to me, felt like the center of the universe. From the time I was old enough to carry a clipboard, I was involved. I'd be stocking shelves at 12, helping in the office at 14, and by the time I hit college, I was basically running certain departments during summer breaks. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours, or so I thought. I grew up with one brother, Jason. If I'm being brutally honest, Jason was always the golden child in my parents' eyes, but not because he earned it. He was the baby, the one who, according to them, just needed time to figure things out. That time seemed endless. While I was sweating through 12-hour shifts, Jason was sleeping until noon and burning through money. My parents constantly made excuses. He's creative. He's just not a 9-to-5 type. He'll come into his own eventually. Meanwhile, if I got a B+ instead of an A, or if I messed up a shipment, I'd get the full lecture about responsibility and how the business was our family's legacy. It was crystal clear. I was expected to carry the torch. Jason, he just had to show up occasionally, so no one could say he wasn't involved. By the time I turned 22, I was basically living at the office. My friends joked that I should have a cot under my desk. I had no social life, no hobbies, no serious relationships, just the business. I honestly didn't mind. I thought I was investing in my future, that someday I'd officially be made a partner, maybe even CEO. The employees saw me as reliable, approachable, someone who actually listened to them. A few even pulled me aside and said, "When you're running things one day, this place is going to be incredible." I held onto that like a lifeline. Jason, on the other hand, treated the place like a playground. He'd stroll in late, complain about how boring everything was, and then disappear for client meetings that suspiciously lined up with his bar tabs. If anyone else acted like that, they'd have been fired instantly. But Jason was untouchable. My parents called him the ideas guy, even though not a single one of his ideas ever turned into profit. Still, I kept grinding. I thought if I worked hard enough, proved myself enough, my parents would eventually recognize the difference between me and Jason. I wasn't looking for praise. I just wanted to believe my sacrifice meant something. And then, just when I thought the future was finally within reach, everything flipped. I'll never forget the day it happened. I came into the office like any other morning, coffee in one hand, a stack of reports in the other. I was already making a mental checklist of everything that needed to get done. Finalize payroll, prep for a vendor meeting, double-check a shipment that Jason had forgotten to follow up on. Same grind, different day. Except when I walked into the conference room, both of my parents were already sitting there. My dad had that serious, business face look, and my mom couldn't even meet my eyes. Immediately, my stomach dropped. "Sit down," my dad said. I thought maybe we lost a client, or there had been some financial disaster. I had no idea that the disaster was about to be me. My mom started with the classic, "You know how much we love you," which is basically the universal prelude to betrayal. She went on about how proud they were of me, how much I'd given to the business, how I'd always been so capable. I kept waiting for the part where they offered me a partnership or at least more authority. Instead, my dad cleared his throat and said, "We have to let you go." I actually laughed at first. I thought it was some kind of sick joke. I asked, "What do you mean, let me go? I'm your son. This is our business." That's when my dad explained that the company was tight on finances and couldn't afford to keep both of us. He said they decided it made more sense to keep Jason on board because he needs the stability more than you do. I just sat there, stunned. My entire 20s had been consumed by this place. I sacrificed college parties, vacations, relationships, my sanity, all because I thought I was building a future here. And now they were saying I was out, not because I'd failed, but because I was too successful? Because Jason couldn't survive without the job, but I apparently could. It got worse. My mom reached over, put her hand on mine and said, "You're young, you're smart, you'll land on your feet." But Jason, he wouldn't make it anywhere else. He needs this. I pulled my hand back like her touch burned. So I'm being punished for being competent, while Jason gets rewarded for being lazy? My dad gave me this look like I was being unreasonable. It's not about punishment. It's about family. Jason needs us more. You'll be fine. I wish I could say I stayed calm, but I didn't. I exploded. Years of swallowed resentment came pouring out. About how I carried the company on my back. How Jason was a parasite. How they were blind to everything except their precious golden child. My dad told me to watch my tone. And that's when I realized the conversation was already over. Their decision was made. I walked out of that office with nothing but a box of my things. No severance, no thank you, not even a promise that the door would be open if I wanted to come back. Just out. Jason was leaning against the front desk when I left, smirking like he knew exactly what had happened. He didn't even try to hide it. Tough break. Bro, guess some of us are just built different. That was the last straw. I didn't say a word. I just walked out, got in my beat-up car, and drove away with my entire world crumbling behind me. I remember thinking, maybe they're right. Maybe I'll be fine. Maybe this is the push I need to start my own path. But underneath that tiny flicker of hope was something darker, heavier. Rage. A deep, seething anger I couldn't shake. I didn't know it yet, but that anger would shape everything that came next. The first few weeks after I got fired were some of the darkest of my life. I went from working 60 to 70 hours a week, having a clear, if exhausting, routine, to waking up with nothing to do and no reason to get out of bed. The silence in my crappy apartment was suffocating. I kept replaying that conference room moment in my head, wondering if I could have said something different to make them change their minds. But the truth is, nothing I said would have mattered. Their choice wasn't about logic or fairness. It was about Jason. It had always been about Jason. I tried applying for jobs right away, but my resume was basically one giant line that said, worked at family business since I was 12. Sure, I had skills, operations management, logistics, vendor negotiations, but without a degree or formal references outside my parents, nobody seemed interested. Every rejection email chipped away at me. I burned through my tiny savings just paying rent and utilities. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, scrolling through social media, seeing my old friends building careers, traveling, getting engaged, while I was eating instant ramen and wondering if I'd made a huge mistake dedicating my life to people who would throw me away so easily. There were moments I nearly broke. Times when I thought about calling my parents, swallowing my pride, and begging for any kind of rollback at the company, even if it meant working under Jason. But then I'd remember his smug face when I left, that smirk, and my stomach would twist. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't. The turning point came one afternoon when I was sitting in a dingy coffee shop, nursing a $2 cup I couldn't afford, scrolling job boards. Some guy next to me noticed the spreadsheet I was working on and struck up a conversation. Turns out, he was a mid-level manager at a competing company in the same industry. He was impressed by how I'd organized a vendor rotation schedule, and when I explained my background, his jaw actually dropped. "You've been doing this since you were a teenager? No wonder you look exhausted," he joked. Then he got serious. "Listen, we could use someone like you. Send me your info. I can't promise anything, but I'll put in a word." That tiny moment of recognition felt like someone had cracked open a window in a suffocating room. Within a month, I landed an entry-level role at his company. It wasn't glamorous, and it paid less than what I'd made at my parents' place, but it was a start. And for the first time, I had bosses who weren't my parents. They actually evaluated me on merit. I worked like a man possessed. I showed up early, stayed late, volunteered for projects no one else wanted. My coworkers started noticing, then my supervisors. One promotion led to another. Slowly, I could breathe again. But beneath the relief and pride, that anger never went away. Every success felt like fuel, proof that my parents had been wrong. I told myself I was just moving forward, focusing on me. But in the quiet moments, I pictured Jason sitting in my old office chair, probably screwing things up, and it kept me grinding harder. The irony? Getting fired ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to build something of my own, to realize my value wasn't tied to my parents' approval. But at the same time, it lit a fire I couldn't put out. Because deep down, I didn't just want to succeed. I wanted to prove them all wrong. And maybe, if I was honest with myself, I wanted revenge. Once I got my foot in the door at the competitor's company, it was like I'd been dropped onto a different planet. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the kid of the owners. Nobody tiptoed around me. Nobody excused my mistakes because of my last name. But nobody dismissed my achievements either. Everything I did was measured on results, plain and simple. And I thrived. All those years grinding under my parents had forged me into someone who could juggle operations, handle logistics disasters, calm down furious clients, and keep a business moving even when things went sideways. The difference now was that people actually noticed. My manager once told me, "You've got this uncanny ability to see 5 steps ahead. That's not something you can teach." Within 2 years, I'd been promoted twice. My salary finally caught up with the workload, and for the first time, I had disposable income. I wasn't rich, but compared to eating instant ramen and dodging eviction notices, I felt like a millionaire. I also started building connections, real ones. The company sent me to conferences, networking events, client dinners. I shook hands with people I'd only ever heard about in hushed tones back at my parents' office. Some of them even remembered me from when I was younger, tagging along with my dad. They'd say things like, "Didn't think we'd see you on this side of the industry," or with a smirk, "Guess you finally escaped the family circus." That stung, but it also fueled me, because the unspoken truth was obvious. My parents' reputation wasn't nearly as spotless as they thought. People saw through Jason. They knew he was a joke. By my late 20s, I wasn't just a cog in the machine anymore. I was leading projects that directly competed with my parents' company. When our firm won a major contract that I'd spearheaded, I got pulled into a board meeting where the CEO himself congratulated me. "You've got sharp instincts," he said. "Keep this up, and you won't just be managing projects. You'll be running divisions." Meanwhile, I'd hear whispers through the grapevine about my parents' business. Nothing concrete at first, just little things. Shipments delayed, clients unhappy, vendors leaving. I didn't gloat, at least not openly. But deep inside, there was a dark satisfaction. I wasn't sabotaging them. I wasn't calling clients to poach them. I was just doing my job better than Jason ever could. And the market was making its choice. There was one night that crystallized everything for me. I was at an industry dinner, seated across from a longtime supplier who used to work exclusively with my parents. Halfway through his steak, he leaned in and said, "You know, your folks really screwed up letting you go. Everyone knows it. Jason's running that place into the ground, and your parents are too blind to see it. But you've got the future." I smiled politely, but inside, my heart was pounding, because that was the moment I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was rising, and whether I meant to or not, every step I climbed put me higher while dragging them lower by comparison. The irony? The harder I worked, the more my company thrived, and the weaker my parents' position became. It wasn't a vendetta, it was business, but it felt personal, like the universe itself was evening the scales. Still, a part of me wondered, how long before our worlds collided again? The first time I realized just how bad things had gotten for my parents' company was when one of their longtime clients called me directly. Not through official channels, not for business with my current employer, just to vent. I still remember his voice on the other end of the line. Frustrated, tired. "Look, I know you don't work there anymore, but you're the only one who ever understood how to get things done. Do you have any idea what's happening with them? Shipments are late, invoices are a mess, and I can't even get Jason to return my calls. It's a disaster." I had to bite my tongue. Part of me wanted to say, yeah, that's what happens when you hand the reins to a clown and kick out the person who kept the machine running. Instead, I gave a vague, polite response and got off the call. But it stuck with me. Over the next year, the whispers became shouts. Vendors were pulling out. Smaller clients were cutting ties. The industry press, usually pretty quiet when it came to family-owned businesses, ran a piece about legacy companies struggling to adapt. While they didn't name names, anyone who knew the sector could read between the lines. And Jason, He doubled down on arrogance. From what I heard, he was throwing money at flashy but pointless ideas. Expensive tech upgrades no one asked for, creative rebrands that alienated old clients, and a disastrous attempt to break into a new market with zero research. He treated employees like disposable tools, driving out some of the most experienced people they had left. The employees who stayed weren't loyal, they were stuck. And even they started reaching out to me quietly. "Man, it's not the same without you. Place is falling apart." One of them messaged me on LinkedIn. It was surreal. This was the business I once bled for, the place I thought would be my legacy. And now it was rotting from the inside. I heard through mutual contacts that my parents were in denial. My mom insisted, every company has ups and downs. My dad blamed the economy, the competition, even the employees, basically everything except their own decisions. And Jason, he strutted around like a king, acting as if losing clients was part of some grand strategy only he understood. But the numbers didn't lie. Their revenue was shrinking. Their reputation was tanking. And while they tried to patch holes with quick fixes and loans, the ship was clearly sinking. Meanwhile, my career was hitting new highs. By now, I was managing a full division at my company. My projects were bringing in profits that made headlines in trade publications. At industry events, I was no longer the underdog, I was the guy people wanted to talk to. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. I'd gone from being the expendable son to one of the most respected names in the field, while the golden child was dragging the family business into the dirt. I wish I could say I felt pity. Sometimes, late at night, I'd think about my parents, about how tired they must be trying to hold everything together. A part of me wondered if they regretted their choice, if they ever sat up in bed and thought, we bet on the wrong son. But mostly, I felt vindicated. They told me I'd be fine without them, and they were right. I was more than fine. They, on the other hand, were about to face consequences they never imagined. And I had no idea just how closely I'd be involved in their downfall. Life has a cruel sense of humor sometimes. For years, I'd pushed thoughts of my parents' company to the back of my mind. I told myself I was over it, that I was too busy building my own career to worry about what they were doing. But fate has a way of dragging old wounds back into the light. It started innocently enough, in a quarterly leadership meeting at my company. We were reviewing potential acquisitions, smaller businesses struggling in the market that we could absorb to expand our reach. Most of the names meant nothing to me, until one popped up on the slide. My parents' company, the logo I grew up seeing on my dad's office door, the name I used to wear on embroidered polos at trade shows, the business I thought I'd inherit someday. And there it was, listed in black and white as a high-potential acquisition target. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. For a second, I thought I might be hallucinating. But no, the numbers were all there. Declining revenue, massive debt, high employee turnover. The whole sad story laid out in neat bullet points. My boss noticed me staring at the screen a little too long. "You know them?" he asked casually. I swallowed hard. "Yeah, family business." There was a pause. Then he raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. That could work in our favor. Having someone on the inside, so to speak." Inside. The word echoed in my head. I wasn't inside anymore. I'd been thrown out like yesterday's trash. And now, years later, I was sitting at the table where their fate would be decided. Over the next few weeks, I learned more than I ever wanted to know about how badly things had deteriorated. They were bleeding money. Clients were fleeing. Vendors refused to extend credit. Their so-called expansion ideas had flopped so hard they were practically case studies in failure. And Jason, still there, still managing. The report described him as inexperienced and lacking leadership qualities, which was the corporate way of saying exactly what I'd always known. He was a disaster. Then came the kicker. My company wasn't just considering buying them. They wanted me to lead the evaluation team. It made sense, my background, my expertise, my history with the industry. But it also felt like the universe was handing me a loaded gun and asking if I wanted to pull the trigger. I wrestled with it for days. Part of me wanted to recuse myself, to avoid the conflict of interest. But another part, the louder part, saw this as an opportunity. Not just to prove myself professionally, but to settle the score once and for all. When I finally told my boss I'd take the lead, he gave me a nod of approval. Good. You're exactly the kind of person we need on this. I walked out of his office, heart pounding, because I knew what this meant. For the first time since the day I walked out with that cardboard box of my things, the power dynamic had shifted. Back then, they held all the cards. Now I did. Walking into my parents' office again after all those years felt like stepping into some kind of warp time capsule. The walls were the same beige. The framed Employee of the Month photos still hung crooked in the hallway, and that faint smell of burnt coffee clung to everything. But the energy was different. It wasn't the bustling, confident place I remembered. It was quiet, too quiet. Employees walked with their heads down. Conversations stopped when I passed by. The whole building felt like a sinking ship where everyone knew the end was near. And then there was Jason. He was in the conference room when I arrived, leaning back in a leather chair like he owned the place. He'd gained weight, his tie was crooked, and his fake confidence practically oozed out of him. Well, look who finally came crawling back, he smirked. I didn't rise to the bait. I just set down my folder and said, evenly, I'm not here to crawl back. I'm here representing the company that might buy you out. The smirk faltered for half a second before he plastered it back on. Yeah, right. You're just some middle manager. You don't make those kinds of decisions. That's when my boss walked in behind me, shook my hand in front of everyone, and introduced me as the lead on the evaluation team. Jason's face drained of color. It was better than any revenge fantasy I'd ever had. Then my parents came in. My mom's eyes widened when she saw me, like she'd seen a ghost. Oh my God, you're with them? My dad's jaw tightened. He didn't say anything at first, just gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Anger? Shame? Both? We all sat down. My boss outlined the situation, how our company was considering an acquisition, how we'd need full cooperation to assess their financials, their contracts, their operations. Then he turned it over to me, and just like that, the roles were reversed. Years ago, they had sat me down in a conference room and told me I was out. Now I was the one across the table with the power to determine their future. I kept it professional. I went through the questions, requested documents, noted inconsistencies. But inside, I was screaming. Every answer my parents gave, every excuse Jason blurted out, it was like confirmation of everything I'd lived through. At one point, Jason snapped, "This is ridiculous. We don't need saving. Our brand is strong. Our clients are loyal. Your clients are leaving in droves." I cut him off, unable to hold back. My voice was calm, but sharp. You've lost 30% of your revenue in 2 years. Vendors won't extend credit. Your debt-to-income ratio is unsustainable. That's not strength, that's collapse. The room went silent. Jason turned red. My mom's hands trembled. My dad finally spoke, his voice low. So what happens now? I looked him dead in the eye. That depends on us. On whether we think your company is worth saving or just worth dismantling for parts. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in my father's eyes. Real fear. And in that moment, I realized just how far the tables had turned. After that first meeting, I couldn't sleep for days. On paper, it should have been simple. Evaluate the numbers, assess the risks, make a recommendation. Professionally, I knew what the right call was. My parents' company was a sinking ship, and pouring resources into it would be like bailing water with a thimble. But personally, God, it was complicated. Every night, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, remembering the years I'd spent in that building, the holidays I'd worked through, the friends I'd lost touch with, the relationships I'd sabotaged because I thought I was building a future there. I remembered my mom packing me lunches when I was a teenager working long shifts, my dad teaching me how to negotiate with vendors, even Jason and I as kids, running through the warehouse like it was a playground. For all the bitterness, it was still my history. My blood was in the bricks of that company. But then I'd remember the betrayal, that conference room, the way my dad's voice was so matter-of-fact when he told me I was out. My mom saying Jason needed stability more than me. Jason's smirk when I left with my cardboard box. That memory burned hotter than any nostalgia. The second round of meetings didn't help. My parents came prepared this time, not just with numbers, but with desperation thinly veiled as optimism. My mom tried to guilt me. "We're still family. Don't you want to see us succeed?" My dad leaned on pride. "This company has been in our family for decades. You wouldn't let it die, would you?" Jason, of course, was insufferable. He barely acknowledged me except to make snide comments. At one point he muttered, "You're just here because you got lucky at that other place. We're still the real deal." The irony nearly choked me. Afterward, my boss pulled me aside. "Look," he said, "you know the industry better than anyone. You know this company inside and out. Do you honestly think it's worth saving?" I opened my mouth, then shut it. The professional answer and the personal answer were the same, but for completely different reasons. Professionally, no, it wasn't worth saving. It was outdated, mismanaged, and hemorrhaging money. Personally, no, because they didn't deserve saving, not after what they'd done to me. Still, I hesitated. Was it revenge clouding my judgment? Or was this just the reality they'd created for themselves? That night, I sat in my apartment with a glass of whiskey, staring at the evaluation report I'd drafted. My recommendation box was still unchecked. One checkmark could decide everything. Save them, and I'd be the dutiful son who put family first, even after betrayal. Let them fail, and I'd be the executioner of the empire I once killed myself to build. Finally, I set the glass down, picked up my pen, and checked the box. Not recommended for acquisition. The weight lifted off my shoulders instantly, replaced by a cold, quiet certainty. For once in my life, the choice was mine, and I chose me. The collapse happened faster than I expected. Within 6 months of my recommendation, the deal was officially off the table. My company moved on to stronger acquisition targets, and my parents' business was left dangling in the wind. At first, they tried to put on a brave face. I heard through industry contacts that my dad told everyone they had turned down the deal because they didn't want to be swallowed by a bigger fish. My mom echoed the same line, insisting they were just restructuring. But the truth was obvious to anyone paying attention. Clients kept leaving. Vendors refused to renew contracts. Their best employees jumped ship. It was like watching a dam crack. Tiny leaks at first, then a rush of water until the whole thing gave way. The final blow came when a major client, one they'd had for decades, pulled out and signed with us instead. I wasn't even on the account, but when the news hit, people congratulated me like it was personal. And maybe it was. Not long after, I heard the company had filed for bankruptcy. The warehouse I used to practically live in was shuttered. Equipment sold off. The sign with my family's name on it gone. Just like that. And my parents? They didn't reach out to me directly, but word trickled back through mutual contacts. My dad's health had taken a dive from the stress. My mom was still clinging to denial, telling people they'd bounce back somehow. And Jason did what Jason always did. He ran. Last I heard, he blew what was left of his savings on some half-baked, startup idea, and ended up crashing at a friend's couch. I'd love to say I felt nothing, that I walked away cold, victorious, and satisfied. But the truth is, it was complicated. On one hand, there was an undeniable sense of vindication. They'd chosen Jason over me. They'd thrown away the one person who kept their business alive, and now they were reaping exactly what they'd sown. Felt like justice. On the other hand, this was my family. As much as I wanted to deny it, watching their life's work crumble tugged at something deep in me. I remembered being a kid in that warehouse, my dad lifting me onto a forklift just for fun, my mom bringing pizza on late nights. For all the pain, there had been good times too. And now it was all gone. The weirdest part was the way people treated me afterward. Some congratulated me, even called me brutal, in an admiring way. Others looked at me with something closer to fear, like I'd crossed a line they couldn't imagine crossing with their own families. A few even hinted that I should have stepped in to save them, that it was the right thing to do. Those comments stuck with me, because while I knew logically that I hadn't caused their downfall, That was Jason and my parents' own doing. I also knew I'd had the power to throw them a lifeline. And I hadn't. Sometimes late at night, I'd ask myself, did I let them drown? Or did they jump into the water on their own, and I just refused to follow? The line between those two answers blurred more every day. But one thing was clear. Their empire was gone. And I was the one still standing. It's been a few years since the dust settled. My career has never been stronger. My division is thriving, my team respects me, and professionally, I'm exactly where I should be. Financially, I'm secure. I've even started mentoring young professionals who remind me of myself when I was younger. Ambitious, exhausted, and willing to give everything to succeed. But there's a lingering question that never leaves me, and that's why I'm posting this here. I dedicated nearly a decade of my life to my parents' company. I sacrificed everything. College breaks, friends, relationships, mental health. All because I thought I was building a future, a legacy, something that could last beyond my parents' lifetimes. And then they fired me. Not because I wasn't good enough. Not because I failed. But because my lazy brother needed stability more than I did. I walked away with nothing. Jason stayed, untouched and unaccountable, while I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. I rebuilt myself from scratch, starting at a competitor and clawing my way to a leadership position. I thrived. I succeeded. And along the way, my parents' company started to collapse under Jason's mismanagement. Years later, the company my employer was evaluating for acquisition was theirs. I was asked to lead the assessment. I had the power to save them or let them fail. And after days of deliberation, after considering nostalgia, guilt, and the family-first rhetoric my parents always preached, I made my choice. I let it fail. I recommended against acquisition. I walked away, leaving them to deal with the consequences. The business went bankrupt. Jason's life spiraled. My parents were devastated. And I feel a strange mix of vindication, relief, and guilt. On one hand, I know they brought this on themselves. They made a conscious decision to throw me away in favor of Jason. I didn't sabotage them. I didn't manipulate numbers or clients. I didn't do anything unethical. I simply declined to save them because they had already shown me exactly where I ranked in their priorities. Last. On the other hand, they were still my parents. And Jason, my brother, watching their world crumble, even knowing it was deserved, left a bitter taste. I keep asking myself, did I go too far? Did I make a reasonable business decision? Or did I cross a line by letting emotions, pain, betrayal, resentment, guide me? I've replayed it in my head 1,000 times. Could I have intervened in a way that saved the business without sacrificing myself? Could I have done the right thing, even if they never valued me properly? That's why I'm here. AITA for letting my parents' company collapse after they fired me to keep my lazy brother? I don't know if this is justice or cruelty. I just know this. The power balance has shifted, the empire is gone, and I'm the one still standing. But standing alone has never felt so complicated.